Are you nervously awaiting your first IBJJF tournament this weekend or need a refresher on how it works? I'll take you through the 10 most common unexpected IBJJF issues that can mess up your experience, or even get you kicked out, in both gi and no gi, and most importantly, how to avoid them. Make sure to pay attention to the most common question about strategy that I get as well, because I've seen this make or break matches. If you're new here, hi, I'm Josh, and I've competed in over 260 matches around the world, most of them IBJJF, and I want to share with you a few things I've learned. If this is helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Alright, let's get into it. The first most common mistake is for you no-gi people, and that's having the wrong color rash guard. And more broadly speaking, this is about not knowing the uniform rules in general for gi and no gi. In some tournament organizations, you can show up with any color rash guard, but IBJJF makes you wear the color of your rank or you'll get disqualified. I've had to lend a rash guard, shorts, or an entire gi before to many poor souls in the past. Most popular brands will tell you if they're IBJJF legal, but make sure you read the rules and always bring 2 of each uniform. If you're unsure, you can ask the gi inspector at the event. Next, you want to avoid being overweight. Some organizations like Jiu-Jitsu World League have a weight allowance where you can be slightly overweight, but IBJJF is not flexible on the weight. If you miss it, you'll be disqualified. You have to weigh in with your uniform on, and the weights are different for gi, no gi, and other factors. Also note that there are slight differences in the upper limits if you're weighing in with kilograms versus pounds depending on which country you're in. Check the weight information on the IBJJF website. Speaking of weight, the next most common mistake is cutting weight if it's your first tournament. Cutting weight adds a lot of extra stress, especially if you don't know how to do it properly and don't fuel yourself enough. Your first tournament is probably not the best place to experiment. Now, I've cut weight many times, but for newer competitors especially, I advise just not doing it at all. And if you're unsure if you can make the lower weight class you have your eye on, just sign up for the heavier one. You'll thank me later. The next mistake you want to avoid is missing your match time. The IBJJF website shows scheduled match times, but those change based on a variety of factors. For example, if you and your opponent check in early, you might get bumped up and compete immediately. Don't take the schedule for gospel. Show up an hour early before your division's start time to give yourself some time to warm up, and you need to take the initiative to check the match board in front of the bullpens. If you see your name show up, you can go check in. Don't wait for your name to be called. We'll talk more about disqualifications for no-shows in a bit. If you miss your match time, you're out. Also, if you end up doing open class, which you can sign up for if you hit the podium in your division, stay right next to the bullpen and check in ASAP, because they get a little antsy at the end of the day with disqualifying people very quickly, since a lot of people don't even show up for open class. A second ago, I mentioned showing up early to give yourself time to warm up, which leads me to the next mistake to avoid, and that is not warming up. It's actually very surprising to people, but most IBJJF competitions don't even supply warm-up mats. This is usually reserved for major competitions. If you don't take the initiative to warm up, you might gas out in your first match sooner than expected because you'll probably get a big adrenaline dump. Getting a light sheen of sweat going before you head to the bullpen is a good way to prevent too much shock to your nervous system in the first match. When you get in the bullpen, try to keep moving because you might have to wait a while if your opponents don't show up on time. Which leads me to my next point. Avoid expecting your opponents to show up on time. If you followed my advice, you went into the bullpen right when your name showed up on the match board, but your listed opponent still hasn't shown up and you're standing around waiting. People get especially annoyed in small brackets when this happens. It might even be a 2-person bracket where you only have one opponent, and if they don't show up, well, you're out of luck, even though you got a default gold medal. You can still do open class though. We'll talk more about small brackets in a second, but as far as your opponent not showing up, they actually give like 10 to 15 minutes after the originally scheduled match time before they DQ somebody. I forget the exact number. But don't be that person who shows up late or doesn't show up at all if you can help it, because it literally delays the whole tournament. Sometimes injury or other things will prevent you from being able to compete, and if that's the case, you can email IBJJF with a doctor's note even after the tournament, and sometimes they'll refund you even if they say they won't. So that's understandable, but try not to be late. And if you're the person waiting for your opponents to show up, just know that this can happen, and don't let yourself get upset, because you can't control it, and it'll only get to your head. So just stay warm and ready. And again, on the note of time, if you won and got to the podium in first, second, or third place, and there is double third by the way, just go to the podium right away. Don't make the other people people in your division have to wait on you. I mentioned small brackets, and there are a few things that can go down. You might be at a smaller tournament, so all the divisions are small, or you might be in a division like Master 3, Purple Belt, Lightweight, that literally has one other person in it, or you're in a 3-person bracket. There's different ways to handle these scenarios. For the case where it's just 2 people, before the deadline, you can move down in age or up in weight if you find a division that has more people in it and you want more matches. For example, just because you're 35 doesn't mean you can't fight an adult. If you want to roll the dice though, you can, but you'll just get that one match or risk them not showing up. But no matter what, you'll have the opportunity for open class since you're guaranteed a podium, either 1st or 2nd place. If you're in a 3-person bracket, you'll do this weird round robin thing where you still get at least 2 matches. So if you lost your first match, stick around. You're not out yet. This is the only exception to the single elimination system that a lot of people are not aware of, and I've seen people just leave the tournament after they lost their first match in a 3-person bracket. Don't do that. Read the rulebook to see the specifics of how this works. Speaking of your bracket and waiting in the bullpen, the next thing to avoid is not knowing when to go to your mat. Even if you're in the bullpen, you're not safe yet. You can still get disqualified. There's these people called mat coordinators whose job it is to find each pair of opponents in the bullpen and then take them to the mat to compete. I've seen it happen where people don't hear their name called and get disqualified even though they were literally standing in the bullpen. And when you're out, you're out. You should keep an eye on your mat coordinators so that you know when it's your time to go. Speaking of disqualifications again, the biggest one I see is reaping. A lot of people think it's only about crossing your leg over the midline of the body, or actually don't even know this rule exists, but there are other ways to get disqualified. I've actually done around 80 ankle/leg locks in competition, so I'm pretty familiar with these rules and have only been DQ'd once so far. I actually made a whole deep dive competition ankle lock study that devotes an entire section to these rules, which is available now to YouTube members by clicking join below, or you can find the same exact video on Patreon, and the link is in the description. If you want to read the rules for yourself, again, check out the IBJJF rulebook. Now, we've talked a lot about logistics and rules, but I want to talk about the biggest thing to avoid when it comes to strategy, and that is not knowing your opening move. This is the biggest question I get from white and blue belts. Should I pull guard or look for a takedown? This is critical because you can run out of time in your match sooner than you think. If you get behind in the beginning, sometimes you're working the rest of the match just to catch back up. So I've seen opening moves literally make or break entire matches. Don't forget though, there is a third viable option. Feel out your opponent and decide in the moment. This one's a little harder though for newer people and often results in a bit of chaos or stalling penalties. I'd say what you choose depends on 4 factors, but whatever you choose, I would advise committing to it. The 4 factors are which thing you're best at, which thing you want to get better at, how much you care about winning this particular match, and what you think your opponent is going to do. If you're great at takedowns because you wrestled in high school and want to sharpen that skill, go for it. If you suck at takedowns and want to get better at them, competition is actually the perfect place to experiment, counterintuitively. But if you're at a major tournament, and actually I think my 3rd tournament ever was Worlds, you might want to stick with your A game. I also like to take a glimpse at my opponent's matches if they're going ahead of me so that I can see their opening move. For example, if they're going to most likely pull guard, then I know that I can play top position. But you want to make sure you don't play too much to your opponent because you want to just focus on executing your game. For example, it's totally viable to decide to pull guard regardless of what you think your opponent is going to do. And it also stresses some people out when they start watching their opponents too much, so I advise just being careful going overboard with this. I know that was 10 things already, but just one final tip, and that's to avoid focusing too much on winning. I know, it sounds weird to say that since the ultimate goal of competition is to win, but you'll save yourself a lot of anxiety and you'll have a lot more fun if you simply focus on internal goals. And keep in mind, this doesn't keep you from winning. You can still win. Some internal goals, for example, might be focusing on executing your game, or focusing on learning breath work to calm your nervous system in the bullpen, or simply making it through to the end of your first tournament. If you set your own measure of success, then you can win every time, and that frees up space in your mind to actually enjoy the process. Now, I know this was a lot of information, and I don't mean to scare you. Actually, it's the opposite. It's mostly simple things that if you're aware of them beforehand, it should all go pretty smoothly. If you know all the little unexpected things that can happen, it eliminates an entire category of stressors so that you can focus on having fun doing what you're there to do, which is learning how to compete. It's a separate skill from jiu-jitsu and simply requires that you show up to tournaments and do them. You got this, I promise. Now, if you have any questions on what we talked about or any tips I missed that you've learned already as a competitor, drop a comment below. Good luck on your tournament. Don't forget to subscribe if this was helpful, and make sure to check out this next video. Catch you in the next one.